Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I have another fun video for you today. This one's going to be a continuation of my quilting series, and today we're going to talk about fabric. Fabric is of course one of the most fun and important parts of your quilting, and so I'm going to cover some of the most common pre-cuts as well as yardage, and then I also wanted to share a couple of my favorite stores that I like to buy from because I think I found some pretty good ones and I've had a lot of questions on that. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about fabric, then let's get started. So pre-cuts are one of my most favorite ways to quilt or to buy fabric, and the reason is because when you buy a pre-cut bundle, it's like a great way to get a small variety of all of the fabrics in a specific line. Now pre-cuts come in a lot of different sizes, and there's also a lot of different projects. Usually your pattern will tell you which kind of a pre-cut to use, or it will tell you a yardage amount if pre-cuts aren't an option. So I just wanted to cover the most basic ones today, and we're going to start from small to big. So the first pre-cut that we have here is a little, this one's a little ruby Moda pre-cut, and these are 2.5-inch squares, and I'll do close-ups of them for you. These run anywhere from about $4 to, I've seen them like $8, somewhere in there. It kind of depends on where you get them from. But these are great for smaller projects. I have a couple projects I'll try and link below for you. They're good for like pillows or book covers or purses, bags, that kind of thing. And I've also used these quite frequently for posts in my quilt. And posts are just like little corner pieces that kind of separate out your blocks. So these are a great option. The other reason that I like these is if I'm not sure I want to get a full line of fabric or not. A lot of times I'll order one of these little minis and just check out all of the fabrics before I go and purchase a larger amount of them. So again, this is a mini charm, and they are 2.5-inch squares. All right, the next size up would be a charm pack. Now these are 5-inch squares, and it's the same concept as the mini, but as you can see, they are quite a bit bigger. There are patterns out there specifically designed for charm packs, quilt patterns, and I'll try and link a few of my favorite places to do those too. One of them is Moda Bake Shop. You can actually go to their website and you can see on the sidebar they have all of the pre-cut sizes, and you can click on one of them and then it will show you all of the different quilt patterns that are great for that particular size pre-cut. The other reason that I like pre-cuts are that it's a lot less expensive if you're going to buy like a pack like this to make a quilt out of. You don't end up with like a ton of excess fabric or whatever, and it seems a little bit more economical if you're using a pattern that specifically calls for these. So again, I like these, and again you get a full range of fabrics in that specific line. So it's a great way to get kind of a variety of fabric that all go together. The next size up is going to be these jelly rolls. Now jelly rolls are just these pretty little strips of fabric. They're most often 2.5 inches wide this way, and then they're usually cut from the width of fabric, which usually means that you're going to get anywhere between 40 and 43 or so inches long strips. There are specific quilts that call for jelly rolls. These can be a great fast way to put a quilt top together because you don't have to do any cutting. The strips are already done. Another fun thing that I use jelly rolls for is my binding strips. My binding I always do 2.5 inches wide anyway, and so it's a lot of fun. You can get a lot of binding strips out of one of these jelly rolls, and it's kind of like a scrappy binding, and you can just put them all together really quickly without having to cut a bunch of strips. These jelly rolls, depends on which ones you buy, but they typically run, this is a Moda jelly roll, so as you can see it's quite big around. Some of the Riley Blake jelly rolls are a little bit thinner. There's not quite as many lines in the fabric, so you'll just want to look for that. But typically the Moda jelly rolls are anywhere from about $25 to $35 a piece. So that's those. The next one are the layer cakes. Now layer cakes are 10-inch squares, and just for reference, here is the charm pack and then the mini charm. And the layer cakes often come with some instructions on how to make quilt blocks on the back, which are kind of fun. They give you, again, a variety of all of the lines of fabric, and they also, since they're larger than the charm packs, you have a little bit more of variety of what you can actually make with these. They're great for rag quilts. They're great for just like regular patchwork quilts, pinwheels. I've used these for quite frequently. And actually there's just a whole slew of quilts that you can make from layer cakes. And again, if you go on Moda Bake Shop, you can find a bunch of different patterns and whatnot that call for layer cakes. These typically run about the same cost as a jelly roll, I've found, so somewhere around $25 to $35-ish. It really kind of depends on how many lines are in the bundle. So you'll want to kind of check that. Different manufacturers have a different amount of fabrics. Typically there's about 40 or so in the Moda jelly rolls, charm packs, and layer cakes. Some of the Riley Blakes are more like 20, 22, something like that. All right. The next size up is the fat eighth bundle, and a fat eighth bundle is basically a half of a fat quarter, which we'll talk about in just a minute, but typically these are cut, at least the Moda ones are cut 9 inches wide by 22 inches long, and this is a great way to get, again, another selection of all of the fabrics in a line, but enough to give you a little more options when you're making your quilt. And I've also found that this is definitely plenty of fabric to do an entire quilt top out of and have a little bit left over. It kind of depends on your fabric or your pattern that you're using. You have to keep in mind they're only 9 inches wide, so if one of your cuts needs to be wider than that, you know, you may or may not be able to do that out of a fat eighth bundle. But these are a little bit less expensive way to get a little bit more fabric, so I actually really like getting these fat eighth bundles. These kind of depends again on the manufacturer, but around $40 to maybe $60 depending on how many lines are in the bundle, where you get it from, and that kind of thing. All right, the next bundle is the fat quarter bundle, and a fat quarter bundle is typically 18 inches wide by 22 inches long, so it's double that of the fat eighth bundle, and you can kind of see the size difference anyway. And these are probably one of my most favorite bundles because it gives you quite a bit of fabric, and you can for sure get 1 to maybe 2 quilt tops out of this bundle depending on, again, how big your quilt is and what pattern you use. Again, these are going to vary on price depending on how many fat quarters are in a bundle. Typically the Moda ones have around 40 fat quarters in a bundle, but as you can see, here's another Moda fat quarter bundle. This one is Lil Red, and it's super cute, but it's got about half the amount of fabric as this other one, which this one is Vintage Picnic by Bonnie and Camille. So you can see the price will also reflect the amount that you're getting. And then here's another cute one. This one is Vintage Market by Tasha Noel, and I haven't counted them. I think there's around 20 fat quarters in this, but your price on your bundle will vary based on how many you have. So these are going to run anywhere from, I would say, you know, like $50 to $60 for the half kind of size bundle, up to $80 to sometimes $100, and sometimes even a little bit higher for this kind of bundle. Now that might seem like a lot, but again, it really depends on the line that you get, where you buy it from, and so we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. The last thing I want to show you is some yardage. So of course you can always buy fabric by the bolt, or you can go to like your local quilt store and buy yardage. Now, because I use so much white in my backgrounds of my quilts, and if you follow me on Instagram at all, you already know that, but I actually buy these by the bolt because it's a lot more economical for me to buy an entire bolt of fabric. I always get the same exact color of white. That way I can use whatever scraps I have left over. I don't have to worry about matching, you know, different whites, because believe me, there are 1,000 different colors of whites out there. It can be very intimidating, or you'll end up with a little pile of scraps and then you can't really match them to another quilt if you go buy a different white. So I just kind of keep one of these bolts on hand, and then I don't really have to worry about it. Of course, you don't have to buy an entire bolt of fabric. You can go to your local quilt store and buy off of the bolt. And my suggestion on that is just to buy whatever your pattern requires. Or if you're in a quilt store, one of the questions I get is, how much fabric do you buy if you're just there and you find a piece of fabric that you like? I will typically get maybe either fat quarter of a fabric that I like. I'll try and usually pick out a few coordinating ones if I don't have a specific plan for it, just so I know that it will at least match something. Or a half a yard of fabric is also a great option, because that gives you a little bit more flexibility if you want to make a bag with it, or a quilt, or if you really just don't know, you can kind of do a lot with a half a yard of fabric. So if there's something you really, really love, you're like worried maybe it's not going to be there or whatever, half a yard is usually a good way to go. A lot of times when we go to the stores, my daughters will have them cut a quarter of a yard for them. Now the difference between a fat quarter and a quarter of a yard is a fat quarter is basically same amount of fabric, it's just fatter. So it's 18 inches wide by 22 inches tall, whereas a 1/4 yard cut is going to be 9 inches wide by width of fabric. So you're still getting 2 strips that are 22 inches long technically if you put them side by side, but it's just a skinnier strip. So again, if you're not sure what you want to do with it, a fat quarter or a 1/4 yard is also a good way to go. All right, so this is typically what a fat quarter looks like. So it's kind of deceiving because it looks like a tiny little piece, but then when you open it up, you end up with this nice big chunk of fabric, and it's even just slightly bigger than my cutting board here. So that's 18 by 22 inches typically. And then if you were to cut this in half down this line to make it this big, this is what a fat 1/8 typically looks like. You can have them cut it the opposite way, but if you order a bundle, at least from Moda anyways, this is the size that you're going to get. So I wanted to take a quick minute and show you a couple of different patterns that I've made and tell you which pre-cut I have used them for, so you can kind of get an idea of all of your different options out there. So let me go grab a few of my quilts and then I'll meet you right back here. Now here's a great example of a quilt that can use a jelly roll. Now this is just a standard log cabin and they're 2.5 inch squares, and so all you really have to do is cut the lengths of the strips in order to continue sewing on around your log cabin. And so that makes this pattern super easy. Here's another fun fat 1/8 or fat 1/4 bundle quilt. This particular one is one of the blocks from the Fat Quarter Shop Snapshots Quilt Along, and this block is called Gone Surfin' by Thimble Blossoms. It's super cute. I've also seen versions of Christmas trees on top, and so you can probably find those on Instagram, but I just wanted to show you another version of a fat 1/8 or fat 1/4 bundle. Here's another one I did. This one is called Swoon, and this one uses a fat 1/4 bundle, and you really do need an entire fat 1/4 to do this just because of the cutting instructions. They're very specific. This quilt is very large. I'll put the measurements up on the screen here for you, but I just wanted to show you an option. And then those little squares down there were 2.5 inch squares that I cut from some of my scraps as well. All right, and I wanted to show you this one. This quilt is actually quite large, and this one was done out of a fat 1/8 bundle. This is called Somerville, and it's a pattern by Thimble Blossoms, and the fabric is Vintage Picnic by Bonnie and Camille. And I just wanted to show you how much you can really get out of those fat 1/8 bundles, aside from a little bit of extra for the borders around the end, of course, the backing, and then the white background. All of the colored pieces that you see were cut from fat 1/8 blocks, and this thing is huge. So as you can see, those are a great option when you're wanting to buy a variety of fabrics. All right, here's a really fun one. This is called Great Granny's Square. The pattern is by Lori Holt, and this is that Little Miss Sunshine fabric that I was telling you about. This is also a great pattern for the 2.5 inch mini charms. As you can see, that's a lot of cutting. Or you can buy a few packs of mini charms and put them together really, really quickly. So that's another option for the mini charms. All right, I just wanted to show you this quilt really fast because this is actually a mix of fabric. And while I typically use all 100% cotton quilting fabric, this portion is the quilting fabric. This right here is actually a white flannel, and then the inside layer is a white fleece. And then on the back side, I did this kind of fuzzy, kind of minky background. So this one was for my daughter. She likes fuzzy stuff and soft stuff, and so I just wanted to encourage you that you can mix fabrics. If you are going to mix a flannel and a cotton together, I would just suggest that you pre-wash the flannel because the flannel actually shrinks quite a bit more than the quilting cotton, so it'll give you a little bit of a more even shrinkage once you put the entire finished piece in the wash. I wanted to show you this quilt as well because I wanted to give you a couple of options for using up your scrap pieces, and this particular quilt is one that I made using just a cardboard template for the leaves, and then I just cut out small leaves out of a variety of different fabrics and then put them onto this quilt. And I do have this on my blog so you can kind of see how that was made. This particular one is a pattern by Corey Yoder, and it's called Playful Petals, and I also did some hand stitching on this as well, so there's lots of options out there. Alright, this is another quilt that I want to show you. This one is done using blocks from the Farm Girl Vintage book by Lori Holt, and as you can see, it uses a lot of tiny little pieces, and this is a great way to use up your fabric stash. As if you start quilting at all, you're going to start having a bunch of leftover pieces, and this is just mixing and matching them into a fun kind of colorful quilt is a great way to go. All right, and I wanted to show you this as well. This little patchwork quilt is one that my 7-year-old made all by herself. This is using the 5-inch charm squares, and she did a great job. Show them the back side. She did a nice soft fleecy backside on it, and she just sewed her quilt top and the backside right sides together and then turned it inside out and just finished it up and did a little top stitch all the way around the outside of the quilt. So that's another good option for using the 5-inch charms.
This one actually is easy and my favorite.
Alright, so that's kind of the variety of fabric out there. Now I just briefly want to talk about where I get my fabric from. I get a lot of questions about that, and especially if you're a new quilter or sewer, then you might not be sure some of the best places to get it. So my first favorite spot to get my fabric is Fat Quarter Shop. Now they have a variety of fun fabrics. They usually have the newest lines, and one of my favorite things from them is that they package it really nice in a plastic wrapping, so if it gets, you know, left on your porch or something, it doesn't get wet. They also have crazy fast shipping. I mean, it's like as soon as you order something, half the time I've received it before I even get the shipping notification for it. They also have a lot of fun projects. They have a YouTube channel with a lot of tutorials on there. I just signed up for a mystery block of the month, and they mail you a package with the pattern and all of the fabric every month, and then by the time you're done you'll have kind of a sampler type quilt to put together. That's a lot of fun, and they just have really good customer service, and the ladies there are really nice. One of my other favorite places to get fabric is on Etsy. A lot of times they have a lot better prices on Etsy just because they're like people like you and me who've started up a fabric shop online. They don't have some of the overhead, and so it can make their prices really reasonable, and most of the places I found have great shipping, good customer service, and they're really willing to work with you as far as if you need something not listed on their website or a custom order. My very favorite Etsy shop is Stitches and Giggles. She has one of the by far best prices that I have found. She has excellent customer service. She's super nice, and she always has crazy fast shipping. But there are tons of different places on Etsy, so if you can't find what you're looking for at like an online store, Etsy is like probably one of my go-to places. Another fun place I like to get fabric is on Instagram. Instagram has a great hashtag, the Great Fabric Destash, and there's lots of people out there just like you and me who maybe have bought something and aren't going to use it, or they bought more than they managed to use up, or they're selling some of their scraps, so that's a great place to check. The only thing I would say about buying off of Instagram is to make sure that the seller sends you an invoice via PayPal and not a request for money. An invoice will protect you if the services come, or if the goods come damaged, or for example if they don't come at all, they don't get shipped, whatever, they will protect the buyer. A send money request is essentially like just handing someone cash, and so you're kind of just taking their word for it that they'll ship stuff to you, and I've never had any issues on there, but I know people who have. So just protect yourself, and if they don't send you an invoice, just request that they send you it in invoice format via PayPal. The last place I like to go are my local quilt shops. Now, I love supporting local businesses. I like that you can walk in and you can kind of touch and feel the fabric in person, and so it just makes it like a fun buying experience. The ladies are usually super nice, and like I said, I really enjoy supporting our local quilt shops. And then, of course, as I mentioned on my other videos, I do have like an amazing giveaway for you. Today's giveaway is sponsored by Fat Quarter Shop, and they're giving away a Fat 8th bundle of this beautiful Kate Spain fabric. She's one of my favorite designers, and this is a nice Christmas bundle to get you started. And if you think it's too early, think again. I usually start my Christmas quilts right about now, mid-year. That gives me plenty of time to get them pieced, quilted, and all done in time for Christmas. So if you want to enter to win this giveaway, I'll put my link to my blog below, and you just need to head over there and enter to win. So I hope you enjoyed this video talking all about fabric. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me at erica@confessionsofahomeschooler.com, and I will do my best to help you out. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you for the next one.